Hello, hello, greetings and salutations. I'm Pat626 and I regularly host Subculture Shock Sunday nights at 10 p.m. right here on Twitch. And I play a lot of goth, industrial, darkwave, deathrock. And one thing that I've always tried to do from the moment I started DJing was to make sure that I represent not just the country I'm from, but other countries as well. And did you know that there's actually a pretty killer dark music scene in Mexico? Here to talk with me about that tonight is both a member of Hueco and a professor and just overall musical historical giant in his own right, José Hernández Riwes Cruz. How's it going, Jose?
Hi, Pat. Hi. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for everyone that is going to join us and is joining. Well, fine. Dandy, as somebody would say.
So, you've been involved with the scene in Mexico for a long time, and so normally what I like to talk about at the beginning of the interview is what I call the supervillain origin story. Everyone asks, well, how'd you get into making music? But before even that, how did you get into even listening to music in the dark music scene? How did you get into these genres yourself?
Well, just to make it quick and not taking a long time, because I usually take a long time talking about this. Yes. Mexico had this ban of rock music since 1971, more or less, up until the NAFTA came along. That it's maybe something like 85, 86, and it was gradually, it was gradual the way we get allowed to have international concerts here in Mexico, and for the same reason, albums that were not mainstream, came to the huge stores. Nonetheless, since 1971, many little groups of people began to import albums, and they weren't, like the regular sort of bands that you would listen on the radio. I mean, yes, we had a huge amount of people listening to Captain Beefheart, Frank Zappa, and progressive rock from Europe, like Italian progressive bands, the krautrock, and gradually these people began to bring new albums from other parts of the world, the things that were like, the strangest things, albums that the huge record labels import, and they were listened there in the company, and nobody liked them, like, no, this is not going to sell anything, so put it on the shelf right there. And this group of people, since they were writing in the few magazines that we had, they could get these records and listen to these records and get in touch with the record labels that published them, and so that's how they came in touch with labels as Recommended Records, Ralph Records, 4AD, Beggar's Banquet, things that were like strange for, not only for the radio, but for many people around in Mexico or Mexico City, and all these people were like they got together in the south of in what is called the south of the city. It's like a cultural south. No, it's not the geographically south of the city, but it's the south where the most important university is settled. Many libraries opened there. many people from the South American and the Spanish exiles came to live, and all of these people, like, we were in the sort of the same private schools, alternative schools, something like the Summerhill method in the UK, and they all began, to exchange all these albums, and that's how by some sort of miracle or something, we get to listen to all these bands. There is still this flea market that it was organized in a museum that where they allowed people, to go and exchange their albums. And as I told you, like, rock was banned, but the youth was like pinpointed, because we had this student movements back in '68 that were brutally repressed by the government, and then in '71 as well. And yes, young people were like, look, like if there were, evil. Moreover, if they were students, moreover, if they listened to this sort of music that, was music from the devil, and of course you were a drug addict, you were, back then, of course, a gay person, you were, what was considered by the middle class and the moral and the morality back then, like the worst of the worst, like, well,
you were just like, hey, that sounds cool, I want to listen to it.
Yes, of course. I mean, we weren't. We weren't happy with. We were listening on the radio. Yes, we had Queen, the Beatles, Rolling Stones in the '80s. Those were still were the huge bands in the '80s. Yeah, new wave came along, and we began to listen to a new wave, but we didn't understand what was the difference between punk and new wave or new pop or the new romantics. Everything was like punk back then, and the stranger you looked, the stranger the punker you were, the punk. I mean, you were a punk rocker. It didn't matter if you were like, oh no, I am influenced by the Blitz back in the London, and I like Stephen Strange. No, you were a punk rocker, and that is that. And yes, and everything was like, by talking with your older brothers, sisters, cousins, friends, and if you were in this circle, you were like submerged in this sort of culture, and of course it was forbidden, so it was like something that you want to be part of. And at some point, a friend of mine came along and he told me, have you seen The Hunger? And I was like, no. I mean, because as well, we tried to watch strange films that weren't shown on the main theaters, or in the film movie theaters that we had. We had these some sort of called cineclubs, where they shown, of course, films, art films, like Fellini,
Sure.
Jarman, all this sort of stuff. But then you had all these rock-related movies, and it was, if they were showing a movie by, Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones or AC/DC, I can't remember the name of that film back then in the '80s, or The Song Remains the Same. Since concerts were forbidden, it was the concert for us. So people got very crazy. They inside the movie theater, and the police came along, and they just like in the opening of Pink Floyd The Wall, they filled the bands of the police, and they took you. I mean, if you were like lucky, they took you to the police station. If not, that you end up, in the middle of the wasteland around the city.
Holy shit.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the funny thing is that middle class people were clapping like, yeah, yeah, take them, you know. If you get your hair cut right there, you know, in the street, people were clapping, people were happy because you were young, you know, and you were and also if you had your long hair or your, you know, geometric hair, they were like, yeah, yeah, they're all satanic, drug addicts, homosexuals. So yeah, I mean, that was the everyday life. So the do-it-yourself culture was like something that we had since the 70s. And the exchange of music, you know, of albums, of tapes, recorded tapes were something, it was the everyday ritual there. So yeah, I mean, this friend came along and told me, have you seen The Hunger? And I was, no, I mean, it's with David Bowie, you have to see it, just to watch it.
And the world was never the same.
Yes, and you know, and in the opening scene, there is this the David Bowie's favorite band. You have to watch this. And yes, I went. I went to the video club, rented the Hunger, watch it, and as you said, the world was never the same, right? So yes, Bauhaus was like the first band that opened that door here in a let's call it a massive way. I mean, it wasn't massive, you know. We were like 50 cats or something like that know about this, but yes, the information was being brought to us by our friends who could travel, you know, abroad, and they got the new albums and they got all of these things, and these little record stores. There was like the treasure as well as this flea market that we had back there. So yeah, that was the first dark music, alternative dark music band I heard. And of course, we tried to look for the record, you know, and many soundtracks of The Hunger were sold, and of course, many disappointments came along when we realized that the song wasn't there, you know, like. And another thing that was funny, you know, is that we thought that yeah, it is the favorite band of David Bowie, but David Bowie is singing, you know. Yes, I mean, many people thought that David Bowie was singing, not Peter Murphy.
Right.
You know? And yes, I mean, as the decade went along, we get to know the next band of course we heard about was The Cure, and then Sisters of Mercy, Susie, Love and Rockets. A funny thing was that Joy Division wasn't popular in Mexico City in the 80s. Of course, we knew about them. Of course, we knew about New Order, but Joy Division exploded here in Mexico in the 90s and was reinforced in the beginning of the 2000s with the film Control.
Right.
And yes, New Order was a band that people knew about it, but like the synthpop band that was like popular here in Mexico was OMD. So yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
So, at what point in time then did you personally go from participating into this underground movement as a listener to deciding? Because you know, there's a difference between bringing in this music from other countries, like, okay, it's forbidden, that's its allure. Mm-hmm. What makes you want to perform it? Because at that point, you're basically performing forbidden music.
Yeah. Well, bands, I mean, they were bands in Mexico City. In all Mexico is, but they were bands here. At the beginning of the 80s, you know, our garage bands played progressive music, progressive rock, you know.
Yeah.
The people of my generation, they played this sort of music. Nevertheless, the people from one generation or maybe two generations before us, yes, uh, they assembled bands in the 70s, but they were bands more like yes, progressive or experimental rock, you
Right.
know, that they had to do with Faust or Universe Zero or stuff like that with rock in opposition. And but at the beginning of the 80s, when punk came along, and when you know, new wave came along, they changed, and they began to play techno pop, new wave, and all the sort of music, you know. And it was a part of the people that were playing music. I mean, the progressive bands were still there, the hard rock bands were there, the folk bands were there, but this group of friends, you know, they were like uh, playing all this thing, and and they began to be dressed like this, and like, you know, all the minimalistic ways that the new wave was bringing. So and since as I told you, we were from the same sort of schools. There was, I mean, there was the little insect, you know, like stinging you, like you have to play, you have to play, you have to be part of it, right? And back in '85, there was this music market in Spain, that in Spain, organized by this famous musician from there, Miguel Rios, and he brought together many labels from Argentina, Mexico, and Spain, and they decided to devise this marketing trend called rock en tu idioma, rock in your language, in order to take bands from Spain to Mexico and Argentina, from Argentina to Mexico and Spain, and Mexico from to Spain and Argentina. The experiment didn't work.
Oh,
uh,
that's sad.
yeah, the Spanish people weren't interested, very interested in what Mexico has to offer, or what Argentina has to offer. Neither Argentina. Of course, there are people who are, you know, that they like all this strange music, and they get it from themselves. But the only country that got interested in the bands was Mexico, and this was because of the banning of rock, you know. And it was huge. It exploded, and back then everybody wanted to have a band. So yes, I was one of those people who wanted to have a band, and I organized my first band with friends from school, and we were called Los Olvidados, the Forgotten Ones. It's a film by Luis Buñuel.
Yeah, proper name. That's a
Yeah,
good name.
yeah, and it was like a proto dark band, you know, because the scene, like called as goth scene, didn't. Well, it started back in '94, you know. But of course, as I told you, there was these people playing synth pop, new wave in a very dark. They were doing very dark atmospheres, you know, and obscure atmospheres with their music. So everything was like going there, going there. We had like the first band who had all this influence. A strange thing was that they were the like people who were Joy Division fans. They called the band Década Hoy because of the song Decades.
Okay.
And it lasted just like for one day, that band. They had this great gig, which is recorded, but you know, they got to in the after the gig, they went to the house of the bass player, and they got, you know, all the egos came along, and they disbanded.
Ah.
But then Década Dos was born, and it was this electro EBM music back in '85, and many bands began, you know, to acquire like the look and because it was the trend, everybody began to be dressed like, with your crepé and with the dark clothing and everything like that. But they didn't listen to this, the proto bands. They listened, yes, of course, they listened to The Cure back then with the Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Head on the Door. But it was like, well, we are listening to all this and we are dressing like that because that's how we have to get dressed right now. If you want to be to move with the fashion, and but yes, this can be called a sort of like a proto scene. When the 90s started, the scene was like then you have this proto scene where there were bands much more involved in dark alternative music, but they used to call us postmo because of postmodern,
Right.
Oh, they come the postmos here because you have all the, the hairdo, the mascara, the dressing, and the little color we used in the 80s, we lost it. We all became like dark dress. Dark clothing dress. And yes, back then I was playing with this band. We were playing, this. We said, well, we want to play something like Bauhaus, like Sisters of Mercy, something like that. And the thing that that was a huge event here was that one of the bands from Mexico became that is one of the most popular bands back there, the Caifanes. Their first record was like a huge hit, and they were dressed, with all this trad goth fashion,
Okay.
And yes, that was like, well, finally we have a band that not only looks but sounds modern. It doesn't sound like AC/DC or doesn't sound like, these other bands. And I am not trying to minimize all the other bands that were there. They had a very, very good proposal. But talking about the scene, this band, like many people, people that are not very well into this, like said, oh yes, they were like copying The Cure, and they have The Cure hairdo, and they're like, well, Echo and the Bunnymen, Jesus and Mary Chain, and even the Sandman,
Yeah.
Edward Scissorhands, they all have the same haircut, and it's not like he's like, but okay, I'm not going to explain to you what is happening. And of course, 89, Disintegration came along, and it was one of the most popular albums here in Mexico City,
As it should be.
Yeah, you can go to the house of your aunt or your uncle, and they had, on the shelf of records, because maybe they weren't music lovers, but they had Thriller by Michael Jackson, Kick by In Excess, Hysteria by Def Leppard, and Disintegration. Those were the albums that you can go to every house in Mexico City and you will find those albums there, right? So yeah, the look and the name The Cure became massive back then.
So this brings up a question. It's interesting to me that it almost sounds like when things from the goth and dark music scene over in America and Europe, stuff that might have taken a little bit longer to really take over here, sounds like it was almost big hits in Mexico because rock as a whole was banned, which means that these things weren't necessarily competing with more quote unquote popular rock bands because those popular rock bands were just as banned in Mexico.
Hmm.
So it was just
Yeah,
a matter of what happened to take over, what happened to get popular.
yeah. I mean, there is something that we're happening there. We're here in Mexico City, and just to to give you an example of how I don't know, let's say schizophrenic the music here was, where Rod Stewart came and he gave three concerts that were, stadium concerts
Okay.
back in '89 when he had just released his album Forever Young.
Right.
It was not a I mean, back then, I don't know for you guys, but I think that it was already that rock, you know?
Yeah.
And for us, it was modern rock. So, yeah, we had this huge concert, not in Mexico City, but outside, And Caifanes, this band, opened one of those gigs, and it was like, huge. It was a big hiatus. And I remember going to that concert, all dressed in black with my, palm tree haircut. And this was in another state, very near Mexico City. That it's like 150 miles, maybe. But it was another country, of course. The people was like looking at you like if you were, the Satan's son or something like that. It was kind of peculiar, but this radio station, one of the most popular radio stations that, yes, of course, broadcasted Rod Stewart. They also broadcast the Peter Murphy's Deep, Cuts You Up, or Love and Rockets, So Alive, So it was something very, very funny. We still were like very, very excited about the latest Eric Clapton's album, as well as the newest Siouxsie and the Banshees or the Smiths album. So it was something curious.
Yeah, because that's very different, at least from my personal experience in America, where like I didn't actually discover, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I didn't discover a lot of the like Peter Murphy and Smiths until later on, even though they were coming out at the same time as, your Eric Clapton, your Rod Stewart albums, stuff like that. So it's interesting to hear that, you could hear those on like the same station.
Yeah.
Where you were.
Yes. I mean, I had the opportunity to go to the United States, because I have family in Sacramento and San Francisco in California. And I remember, in the house of my cousins, talking to their friends, like, yes, I mean, one of my favorite bands is the Smiths. And everyone was like, who? What? I mean, like I mean, and like one of the friends of my aunt, she told me, it was like, oh yes, the favorite band of my daughter is the New Kids on the Block, and I was like, well, that's like some sort of band that we do not listen to, but yeah, the Smiths, and they were like, what do they play? What is their hit song? And I was like, Girlfriend in a Coma. It was the time of the Strange Ways Here We Come, and they were like, oh, how sad. And it was very, very funny, but I mean, one day we went to this amusement park, Great America, and we were waiting for this attraction that it was called The Edge. Like your obligatory half an hour. We were on the on the queue, and my cousin, she just like tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, look at those guys. Those are moths." And I turn around and I see this group of people, all dressed in the goth trad goth fashion, like, and I was wow. I mean, how strong? Because I mean, she said moths, and for me, as I'm telling you, moth was much more related with Quadrophenia and the Who, right? And it
Yeah.
was like, why do you call them moths? Moths. And as years went by, I was like trying to remember the word, and I came with moth. Well, did she say moth, or did she say goth? I can remember. It was up until I was, in the fabulous Facebook page Sounds and Shadows, when many people clarified me that yes, the word was moth back then, I was, oh yeah, so yeah,
Huh.
I just
I learned
yes,
something new today.
yeah, like all right. I mean, but yeah, when the scene was already a goth scene, it was because Cleopatra Records was huge in Mexico City, and all the Cleo bands were like, the new generation of of young people. They were listening to this record label. We were the older ones already, the ones that my friends would listen to the 4AD and the Beggar's Banquet, and they were listening to Cleopatra, and the band, that make the eruption was London After Midnight.
Oh, yes. Yes.
and and they came, and that's why it's 94, the year that it's like the birth of Mexico City's goth scene back then. With London playing two gigs in August and September, if I recall well, and also The Crow, the movie, the film, it
Yeah.
was released as well. So everything was like, everything made sense. All the fragments of information that we have gotten through 15 years, they came together, and
A perfect storm.
yeah, the new bands were formed. My band disbanded, but I decided to, yes, form another band, and that's how Hueco came to be.
Okay.
I said, well, like, okay, so yes, I had this band. I learned what you have to do in order to play in a gig. Now I have to get another band going, and now I know people from the scene, people not only from the dark scene, but from the rock scene. So the network was already there. Yes, international concerts started to occur here in Mexico. I mean, the first, let's say, contemporary bands that came to Mexico City were In Excess, Metallica, and U2. Talking of huge, massive mainstream concerts.
Right.
U2 with Suropa, with the Su TV tour, and Metallica with the Black Album. So yeah, it was. Mexico changed. There was another Mexico back then, and it is the 90s is called like the golden age of rock here in Mexico.
Okay. And that's also when it seems like at least the budding age of goth really starts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So to kind of move forward a little bit, you catalog a lot of this transition in Jumping Someone Else's Train, and you have now remixed the book.
Yes.
So you actually, I was really excited. I got to see a physical copy. You just got
Yeah.
one of the first physical copies of Jumping Someone Else's Train
Here it is.
remix.
Yep.
So what caused you to remix your own book on the history of the dark music scene in Mexico?
Well, the thing is that I am writing a much more complete history of the dark scene in Mexico City, along with a very good friend writer, Macarena Munoz. She's uh, 10 years ago we were called like the the old generation goth scene 10 years ago. Now I don't want to know how are they calling us.
Oh no,
But
they're calling us goth elders now.
yeah, no, I mean, but we were goth elders 10 years ago. It's like,
Oh.
okay. So we're writing that
Goth
the
Methuselahs.
yeah. The first volume is coming out also this year. It is called, and it covers the 80s, a little bit of the 70s, but most of the part from 79 to 89. And it is called, yes, Let's Pretend We're in London. Because all these guys who listen to this music, when rock was banned and they tried to get all these records, they would like to. I mean, we all created our own image of how London was like, and yes, maybe they dress like this and they listen to this music. So let's whenever the older brothers had a party, they said, let's pretend we are in London. So it was like this theme party when everybody was dressed up as if they were in London,
Okay.
And but I had the opportunity to write an article that is the original article called "Jumping Someone Else's Train," which is about the scene right now. From this article was written back in the 2019, something like that, and I was talking about. I said, well, since we are doing this mammoth work, but we're starting from the 80s, we have to have something, that it's contemporary. So I wrote this article because it was supposed to be part of a book about music, contemporary scenes in Mexico City, but I was the only one who sent the article. So
Therefore, you were the best article in the collection.
yeah, and yes, and the publisher she called me and said, well, maybe we can arrange something for this article to become an electronic book. And I was like, okay, that's nice. So let's do it that way. And the book came out back in 2021, but it was an article. It was not a book. Nonetheless, people got very interested because here in Mexico, because of all this banning of the rock, and there are few works that analyze or tell, the story of rock in Mexico. So the people that are interested, they got very. I called their attention, and the book was, we had the launching of the book in this. It was, on Zoom as well, but it called the attention of many people, and this good friend Victor Garcia, who is the owner of this record store, this alternative. I mean, well, we are living back in the 80s, as well, since we don't have huge record stores anymore again because of the digital platforms. He has his record store and his record label, which is called Venas Rotas, Broken Veins in English. And he said, well, I want to make an interview, so to do a podcast. And we were talking, and he said, well, I am releasing books about rock in Mexico, I mean, about punk, about ska, many genres, about rock. And why don't we publish physically your book? And I was, well, I mean, let's do it. But he said, well, but it's an article, so why don't we do it a little bit more, thicker?
Make it beefier.
Yeah. And I said, well, yeah, because there were many things that I left out from the original article. So yeah, let's make this book, but let's preserve the original article and then make this new article that it's of course it talks about the same stuff of this first article, but in a wider, deeper form. And we were just remembering, when the back in the 80s, the contemporary bands like The Cure, they released their single in the 12 inches.
I was gonna say this is the 12-inch mix, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Okay.
You have the radio edit, and you have the 8-minute edit, right? So we took like that idea, and we said, well, why don't we call the book "Jumping Someone Else's Train Remix"? We have our side A, which is the former article, and side B, which is the extended article. So
Okay.
yeah, there's that.
So, and without even meaning to, therefore, you've become almost the foremost expert on the dark music scene in Mexico City.
Yeah. I mean, I envied it. I mean, of course, we wanted to be like the United States, like London, like elsewhere, well, back in the day. And yes, I studied English literature, and I have a major on comparative literature. And I got along with people who, I mean, we were doing, really what we were doing were more like cultural studies, So I have friends, writing about graphic novels, friends writing about video games, and I was writing about music. And we were like, there aren't studies like this here in Mexico. And as I told you, they are not many books about the story in Mexico, And we have had several, this 5 years we have published several new books about it, about the general story of the movement here in Mexico. But since the scene is very, very, very independent or underground, it is one of its failures here in Mexico. It was one of its failures, the elder gods. I mean, they were very endogamic. It was, we are doing things for ourselves, and we don't want this to go out of our limits. And of course, what happened when some people that are interested in the story of rock in a general way, they cannot find something about the scene, Even though back in the decade of the 2000s, we got like several bands recording. We got like 3 or 4 independent publishing houses, 2 magazines that had a national spread. We we had like 4 or 5 venues in Mexico City, devoted to the scene. We have fashion designers. We have many. The scene is very, very, very thick and very, the roots are very strong here in Mexico City. So yes, it was like the commonplace of if you do not do it, nobody else is going to do it.
Well, and so you would think that after all of that hard work that would be it, and you guys would be established and good to go now. But we were talking earlier this week, and you were telling me that actually there's if a global pandemic weren't enough trouble, that some of the local clubs there are in danger. Even though this stuff isn't necessarily banned like it was. It's still, you still have political machinations, shall we say, trying to shut it down.
Yeah, I mean, 3 weeks ago or something like that. Yes, the venues that we have here in Mexico City, they work as cultural venues because it's not only a place where you can go on a weekend nights to dance or to some gig or something like that. But also during the week, most of these places they have film clubs, workshops, literature clubs. Even we even have kickboxing classes in one of them, because DJ Fair, who is one of our most prominent persons in the scene, he's not only DJing, or he just not owns the, well, is part of the, is associated with other people owning the one of these venues, which is called the Real Under. But he's also a kickboxer champion, so he teach kickboxing in the mornings in this venue. So yes, they work like that,
You hear that, everybody? Right? You hear that? You may think your scene is cool, but you have a goth kickboxing league in your scene. All right, hashtag goth kickboxing. I want to get this started in more cities in America. Let's go.
And yes, they work like that.
I want to see I want to see Precious Ken doing a drop kick on DJ Atom Bomb by the end of this year. Let's go. Let's go.
I would be eager to watch that, and the thing is that there is this newspaper which is much more like a tabloid nowadays, that it's like that. And there was this young guy from the scene who got his a place on the newspaper, on the cultural section. And I think it was much more like you have to do a piece on the bars that sell themselves as cultural venues, but they are just bars, they are and yes, he did this piece talking about what is happening in Mexico City. But the thing is that since he is a young guy, of course, and he's a member of the scene, and the only bars that he might know are these these venues, the dark scene venues. So he mentioned them. It was the only bars that he mentioned on his article. And of course, it doesn't matter that rock is not banned anymore, but that is sadly something that is as well, very, very, very deep in Mexico. Rock, you play rock, right? Yes, you are still satanic, drug addict, and homosexual. They don't say it anymore, of course,
but they think it.
Yes, but they think it. And the article was released on a Thursday, and by Friday, one of these bars was closed by the government.
Oh my God!
And talking to the other bars, they say, well, we are expecting the authorities to come along and close. So yeah. Luckily, all the scene here in Mexico City, we got organized, and we are beginning to to make podcasts, or in our gigs we're telling people, we have to take care of these places, because it took blood, sweat, and tears, to open them, to keep them working, and to make them settled. So we have to take care of our scene, and we are working on that right now.
I think I really like hearing this, because I think that a problem that I've seen just in some local scenes, at least in Virginia, is that if there aren't people, and especially new generations of people, who are willing to put forth the work. If people are just like, yes, the scene's established, we're good now, then the scene just dies. And it almost seems like because you all have, the actual government against you sometimes, that almost seems like a point in your favor, because at least people realize that they have to organize all the time or they are going to be shut down.
Yes, I mean, but yes, we could organize ourselves, and one of the good things of the pandemic was that we could make this network wider. It got we began to dialogue with people from Latin America, from Peru, from Argentina, from Chile, and of course from the States and Canada. We get to know Ken, Adam, and Diana from NTV TV.
All of whom are in the chat right now.
Yeah.
all of them sending you heart emojis right now.
Yeah. Brian, from Space Couch. Danny from, all of you guys that have been very, very nice to me and with the Mexican scene. And we have been doing things, I mean, we made the Obscura Festival back in January. We were supposed to do it back in the November last year, October, but things happened. COVID attacked again, struck back, and we couldn't make it. In the hybrid fashion, but we did it, online. And what is coming right now in October, of course, it is like the month of all the scene widely, worldwide, of course.
It's one of the many reasons I'm getting married in October. I understand.
Yes, I mean.
Yeah, like, no, you gotta. It's our month.
Yes. And we having several, I mean, many festivals. I mean, there is one of the most important festival in Mexico City from the scene, which is called Festival Internacional Octubre Negro, International Festival Black October. Which is now we have the 14th edition right now, and yes, we're going to have the support again from Precious Ken and Dear Adam and Diana, with all the things that we're going to be doing. And the thing is that it lasts, of course, a month. It's October. Wow. Black October. So yes. But also we have another festival that is called the Pure Festival, which is that is just happening one day, and the Genesis Festival. All these are with local bands, with Mexican bands. But Cymox is coming, I don't know, maybe I think the Can Dance is coming or something. I mean, many bands are coming in October, so yeah, it's like, one only wishes that October lasted, 60 days or something like that, in order not to,
we can just cut into November. Yeah. Nobody gives a shit about November.
Right. So that's the thing. So yeah, this is coming. So we're reinforcing all this about taking care of our scene within the festivals.
That's beautiful. So you've just dropped a lot of names. So let's imagine that I do not live in Mexico City.
Okay.
But I want to learn all about these great bands, because the thing that was amazing to me is that I've played a lot of Mexican and Latin American bands on Subculture Shock, but when I asked you for a list of prominent bands in Mexico City and the greater Mexican scene, I only got 2 in the list that you sent me that I recognized, which was a mind-blowing thing for me, because that meant here's all of this new music that I get to go and discover now. So where should we start in learning about Mexico City's dark scene and the greater Mexican scene as a whole? Where should we start?
Well, I've made some pieces with Sounds and Shadows. I mean,
There we
we made
go.
a podcast about the beginnings of the Mexican goth scene. I wrote also an article. I have to write more, shame on me, in English, of course. And the rest, of course, the thing is just to get into Facebook here in Mexico and just write goth scene or post punk, because that's the label that it's now everywhere.
Yep.
And then you are going to have several bands that contemporary bands, but also bands from the ancient days. Yes, if you want to go to the very beginning, you might look for this documentary that is called Size, Nadie puede vivir con un monstruo. Size, Nobody Can Live with a Monster, which is the documentary of this enormous band that was one of the pioneering bands in the early 80s. That they were overlooked all through the 80s, and they just were like re-evaluated, rediscovered, and 2 decades ago. And in that documentary, you will find several bands that were, playing with them back then. So there you have that. Of course, you're going to have my book.
Yep.
And the other book that is coming up. And yes, I mean, Sounds and Shadows and MTV, they are being very, very supportive and very generous into giving us a window where we can send our material and put it on, and not only announce the events that are coming, but also the videos that are being released right now. So yes, there is a good place to start.
Well, that's incredible. So yeah, Sounds and Shadows both on Facebook and online, and then MTV TV, which is EM EMPTYVEE TV. It's on Twitch, and I'm sure someone, because I've got both of the heads of MTV TV currently in chat, so I'm sure someone will post a link to that or a Twitch channel name. But those are good places to get started, and
Yeah.
Obviously jumping someone else's train remix. Now, right now it's in Spanish.
Yeah.
Are there any plans to translate that for us poor monolinguistic morons?
Yeah, I mean, we have the plan. I mean, I have the plan, and of course, I have to, get with my faithful companions, so to get advice for looking for a publishing house, in the States that be interested in publishing it, or and we can work on the translation, of course, and yes, maybe we can do something, for releasing this in English, of course, which is like the lingua franca in the world.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, there are the plans, but first I wanted to have the book in my hands,
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, no, get it out first.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
trust me, like that.
Yes.
So
And talking about the bands, you can look for them as also in Bandcamp. I mean, yes, of course, the here in Mexico, the platforms that work are the mainstream platforms, but we have bands in Bandcamp that they have their music there, and the CDs and some vinyls there as well.
yeah, and do not get scared if you're buying Mexican music on Bandcamp when you see that it costs $100, because I learned that that's actually not that much. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, but yeah, we were like, they are not. I mean, since we are not that, into Bandcamp, many bands are always like, hey, is $1, a good price? Because Mexicans, we do not buy. Sadly, we do not buy digital music, but we have collectors.
that's okay. A lot of
Yeah.
Americans aren't either.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, so we have, you can still find vinyl or CDs from bands like, Silueta Pálida, for example, which is one of the first bands, and back in the 80s, or Los Agentes Secretos
I
as
love
well.
that you came with visual aids. This is great.
Yeah, Casino Shanghai in the CD. Syntoma, which this is like the Japanese edition. Many labels from Japan or Europe, they are very interested in doing this. This record is like a compilation of the first electronic industrial bands in Mexico, and it's on Bandcamp, and they are based on San Francisco, I guess, the guys who released this. So there you have here a good compilation of these, and as well I mean, you can find this. It's from Década Dos, the IBM music that I told you about, and of course the jewel in the crown, Size, the band that started all here in Mexico. So yeah, and these guys, Cleopatra bought the rights, so they release their material in vinyl and CD. So yes, you have Size on Cleopatra, as well as one of the youngest and more interesting bands from Mexico, which is called Hoffen. They are also signed in Cleopatra.
I checked that out amongst your list, and that was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Very, like, the latest album came out in 2021, and I cannot recommend that more for people watching right now. Also, you didn't mention Hueco.
Yes, those guys.
but I also I'm probably gonna start off the after party with Hueco tonight, actually.
Okay.
So, which, speaking of that, if you are watching live, up next we've got the after party, where I'm gonna start off with track from Hueco, and then see where that goes. Just gonna do a beat match mix show and see what happens while my darling fiance Jasper plays Cult of the Lamb on stream. And if you are watching on YouTube in the recorded version, then you know that you've got places to go now, Sounds and Shadows, and to Bandcamp, and just various places where you can go and check out some fantastic Mexican goth and dark music.
Yes.
And I will be posting some links in the YouTube description as well of more places that you can check out.
Yes, MTV TV, one of the
Absolutely.
most important places. Yes.
Well, I'll even plug myself. I'm going to be hosting one of their shows in a couple weeks. So,
Yeah.
So, Jose, thank you very much for being on the show. Was there anything else that you wanted to leave us with before you left?
Well, just I cannot thank you enough, but for this again, this window, this for the American audiences to listen to Mexico goth, dark alternative scene. We call it that way because we don't want to be saying what was first, dark, goth, now post-punk. So many labels.
I'm actually participating in a rating party called Music Genres Are Stupid. So I understand.
They were useful when you went to a record store, but not anymore. So I mean, this all dark thing is yes, and yes, I like to thank you very much for opening the window for us.
My pleasure. You're welcome back anytime. I'll look forward to the full like large volume collection that comes out soon. But in the meantime, folks, you should soon be able to get your hot little hands on Jumping Someone Else's Train remix. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you again for joining us in chat. For big shout out especially to DJ D42 for posting all of the links in there. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you.